Hi YouTube, welcome back to Debt Free CF, my channel. I'm going to be covering my first live recording, well, it's not live because you're not watching it live, but my first recording that is current of a budget. I'm going to start with October, so even though today's the end of the first week of October, since I hadn't yet started the budget video, I'm going to go ahead and get that done. It's probably going to be a little bit long just as I talk about some of the introductory parts of how my budget is laid out. I'll do a completely separate video that's just about the structure of it, how I set it up because I did design this myself, where some of my formulas are, what they look like. So if somebody wanted to follow along or make their own, that would totally be possible. I also have a blank copy of this. It's a Google Spreadsheets version, although easily could be turned into an Excel spreadsheet as well. And it covers on the left side everything for the month, and then on the right side everything related to my overall goals and the progress that I've been making on those. So let's go ahead and get started. In the future, I'll make sure that it has a month somewhere in here, but this is for October of 2017. And I've got a line here that's my income, and then a line here that is not income, but it's money added to my budget in terms of some of the bills that I pay based off of what my roommate contributes for that half of some of the funds or expenses. So my job is, I currently work in a tech field where I do some answering of phones. So I do have a very strict clock in, clock out, calculated down to the minute kind of pay structure. But I do occasionally have calls where they just go longer than anticipated, so I end up with overtime, or because we are a 24-hour, 7 days a week, even through holidays company, I sometimes have a holiday that lands on my normal workday, and that will increase the amount I get paid in that pay period because it ends up being like double time. So this can fluctuate usually anywhere within like a $200 range, depending on the week, if I travel, if I'm sick, and if I have overtime. So I always give just kind of a generic amount that's a little bit lowballed. That way I can make my numbers work, and anything more than that just ends up usually going to retirement. Right now, I only have one paycheck so far from this month. It was actually the last day of September, but since I didn't need the whatever $10 from that check towards September, I just put the whole check for October. So there'll still be a second check that I need to add here later, and I'll do that when I do some kind of check-in. So my left column is what I anticipate, or some of the things that are definitely my numbers, and then the right hand column is what I actually get, or some of the things that do come in full out of an account that I'm responsible for paying for. I haven't added the single grocery trip that was done maybe a day or two ago yet, so that's why this is empty. We do have food in the fridge. We do have food in the kitchen that we can eat off of without going grocery shopping, but we actually have done a trip, so that'll get added. Here on the utilities, this is my half in total. All the utilities for the two of us for our unit is in this box, and it's in order of electric, gas, internet. So the electric and the gas can fluctuate, but the internet's always the same. So that's where my calculation comes from, and then this is just a half of that. And then this is used to calculate back to what my roommate actually has to give me. That's going to be part of the rent, but since my roommate pays the utilities out of an account that I don't have access to for both all the utilities as well as cell phone, because we're on a family plan to make it a little bit cheaper. Have a parent on there as well, but basically these two numbers are my contributions to my roommate, and then my roommate contributes this much to rent to me because the rent paycheck my landlord said had to come from me. I had better credit when we applied for the unit, so that's how this all works. So that's where this calculation comes from, and I've just got a full equation here that I wrote, which is the amount that my roommate agreed to pay, which is a little bit more than half, but my roommate's total income in a month is a little bit more than mine, so we're not quite 50-50 income-wise, so we don't pay quite 50-50 for rent, and that's only because my income is a little bit lower as I'm transitioning and figuring some things out with my career. And then the amount that my roommate would contribute to our sinking fund that has a shared card that we use for groceries, and then an amount that was paid ahead of time having to do with some pet expenses that are coming up. So that's also going to go in a sinking fund of sorts. This month, there's not a lot of pet expenses. Basically, the dog got his nails trimmed a little bit earlier, and we usually use Chewy.com to order food and other needs. I have a dog and 2 cats. Well, I have a dog that belongs to me. My roommate has 2 cats that we adopted together about 2 years ago while living together. But should we ever break up or have to split where we're living, there's been an agreement that the cats go there and the dog comes here. So anyway, so the amount that is paid for nails, usually I just pay out of pocket. In this particular instance, the amount in this box is also halved, and my roommate takes responsibility for half. But it's such a piddly amount this month, it doesn't even matter. Next month, all of the animals get their vaccinations. We tried to make it so that it was just one quick stop with everything, but it also makes it expensive. But we know it's coming, always in November. I'll talk more about that in November. It's usually just a clinic for vaccinations. I pay my mom car insurance because the car title is still in my mom's name. Part of it was for tax purposes. Part of it was that the zip code for where the car is quote unquote located needs to be the same. So if the car was in my name and DMV records were in a different city, the insurance rate would change. I don't really feel like that's cheating because I've never been in an accident. I don't have a bad driving record, and ultimately, if something happened to the car, I would still be paying to fix it or get something else taken care of out of my pocket, not my mom's. So it's $32.50 a month if I calculate that in 6 months I owe $195. And with that 6-month calculation, I write my mom a check once every 6 months for the $195. So I start the month with what I've already saved, what I add for that month, and then at the end of the month, what should be in my sinking fund for later calculations. This next category is sort of the miscellaneous or the below things that I anticipate but aren't necessarily a need, so they don't fall into another category, or something that comes up maybe 2 or 3 weeks planned ahead, but sometimes in the month, not known ahead. And so that's why the left one is just blank, because it doesn't really factor. The most this one ever really gets to is maybe $200 to $300, and that's almost always because I've gone out to eat quite a few times, or I've treated a friend to a movie, or I go to a concert, and I mean, you're lucky if you can get any ticket below $50. So that's where those numbers come from. I do have a credit card that I never use. Basically, the only time I do use it is if I'm buying a plane ticket, and so I know I'm buying the plane ticket, but I'm trying to purchase it at a time where the ticket cost is a little bit lower, and then I'm then spreading the amount that I pay over 2 months where I don't actually accrue interest on it because it's purchased partway through a month, and then because it doesn't always make it into the balance on the first month, then you have 30 days delayed of when the full amount would be due before interest. I don't really keep all that much track. I just look at when it's due before interest is due and pay it off. And that's maybe once a year. I don't use that. It would be used probably if I had a huge car repair, or I had a huge medical expense unexpectedly for my dog a couple years ago. He got bit by another dog, and so it turned out to be a couple $100 for the emergency vet visit. And so splitting it over 2 months without accrued interest worked out really well for making it less impacting for my budget, and then I didn't even have to dip into any emergency fund, even though that's what it's there for. Then the next one is retirement. Usually this is my goal, part of how I determine the goal is definitely not based off of 15% of my income. And that's because 15% of my income right now would not even max out my Roth IRA. So I go well above 15%. I also have whatever company match pulled out before I get my check, so it's even more over 15%. I want to say that it would be surprising to me if it was closer to 20%. And how I calculate what I'm paying in a month, I'm doing a little bit of catch up. I didn't start contributing this year until about March or April because I was still putting in some contributions for last year because part of last year I was working only part-time. And so I didn't have quite enough to max out the Roth IRA myself. Occasionally, a parent will throw a couple $100 into my Roth IRA to try to help max it out. And that's sort of like my inheritance. They're probably, I mean, they're not well to do. I mean, they've got retirement for themselves, but I've told them multiple times that I don't expect anything from them whenever they pass. Like, they can use it all for retirement, make sure all of their expenses are covered. That also makes me not have to feel stressed about possibly having to fund like a nursing home. So my ultimate assumption is I'm not getting anything monetarily for an inheritance, but I get parts of it where they throw a couple $100 into my Roth IRA. That's okay. They're investing in my future. It's awesome. So then this calculation is the two numbers added together. So it's my total income or the total amount of money that ends up in my bank account in a month. And then this is the calculation summary of all of the columns in my expenses. And then both of those numbers are transposed. They come down here. And then I've created a simple subtraction equation that basically tells me what the difference is. Now, keep in mind, I only have one paycheck so far out of the two paychecks I'm getting this month. So the fact that I'm in the red or I'm in negative doesn't concern me right now because I know that I'm definitely going to be making more than $200 in the paycheck that's coming of the week that I just finished working. So when I get that number, I put it in. This will jump to positive, and then anything left, because basically everything is covered except food. Everything that's left will either be a couple other random expenses that won't total more than about $200. The rest will go to retirement and other sinking funds over here in purple. So let's talk about the right-hand side. I'll go into more detail about the right-hand side in another video as well when I'm talking about how I set up the entire layout of all of this. But this just helps me keep track of my goals, where I am currently, what I've already accomplished, what goals I have set. Most of the time, these numbers don't jump dramatically, only because I've completed my $1,000 baby step 1 emergency fund, my 8 months emergency fund that's about $8,800 almost. So it's a little less than $1,100 per month of what I would need absolutely to just cover my bills. And then my not actually 15% income that's then going to my retirement, I try to max that out. So here's my tally so far for this year, where I've got $5,500 is what would be a max out of my Roth IRA. So far I've contributed $1,100 in one lump sum, I want to say somewhere around June. And then in July and August, actually I think it was in, this was July and August combined, and then this was September. And part of that had to do with that I had to pay for a plane flight for a family funeral in August. So that's where some of the numbers were lower. But anyway, that's my contribution so far this year. And then what I do over in this one, even though it's not labeled, is the $5,500 for the whole year that is my maximum. How much I've contributed so far. My dad promised over the next couple of months he's going to put in $700, part of that relating to the plane ticket I paid for the family funeral. And then I have 4 months left that is going to be the most number of months I want to use, October, November, December, and then actually into January for contributing to my 2017 retirement. And yes, I did say January would be a possible contribution to my 2017. You can actually make contributions all the way through April of the year after the contribution year. And that just means basically before you file your taxes, before you put it on paper, you can still be contributing. So if I do that with the numbers left, I need to have at least $570 per month added to the account and keeping track to make sure I don't go over to max out the account. So here's my 744, and part of that was a calculation I did based off of sinking fund differences. It's probably going to change in the month. And then I'm not going to go too much into it right now with the sinking funds just because I don't want it to be a long video. It's already really long. And that's where I keep track of the different numbers here. So thanks for checking in. Come back in maybe about a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I'll have another video where I've added the other paycheck. I've added some of the expenses paid so far for groceries. And then a completely separate video from those two will also be just how I set this up, what the boxes order is important based off of priority, how I made the calculations. I'll actually do the formulas with you, and then you can set up your own if you don't already have one. I also do have a blank copy, so if you wanted me to send you a link to that, I can. Again, this is in Google Sheets, so you just need to have access to a Google account to save your own, or you'd have to download it as a Excel spreadsheet, something like that. So thanks for visiting. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to keep pace with me, the different numbers changing and where I go from here. And check out some of my other videos as well. Thanks for watching.